I'm 83 years old, and I can still smell sawdust and motor oil when I walk into the garage. That smell isn't nostalgia, it's who I am. For 38 years, I worked construction in and around Columbus, Ohio, and every house I helped build taught me something. A structure is only as strong as what holds it together underneath. But no project ever meant what this house means to me. The one I built with my own hands and my wife Dorothy's steady encouragement on the outskirts of a quiet suburb. The one where we raised 2 children, where Dorothy died peacefully in the room we shared for 41 years, where I still hear her voice in the mornings when the house is still. And it was exactly this house, the only thing I have left that is entirely mine, that my son Mark and his wife Karen had already started selling behind my back. While I was still living in it, while I was still breathing. I didn't see it coming. That's what stays with me more than anything else. Not the betrayal itself, but how long I trusted what I shouldn't have. An old man who sometimes forgets where he put his keys becomes easy proof that he can't manage anymore. A man whose knees ache on rainy days becomes easy justification for his own safety. My name is Walter Hayes, retired construction worker, widower, father of 2, grandfather of 4. I fed this family with these hands for 40 years and never once asked to be thanked for it. But I never saw this coming either. If you've ever felt your own family start to look at you like a problem that needs to be handled, like something inconvenient standing between them and their plans, press that subscribe button and tell me where in the world you're watching from. You are not alone in this. And this channel exists for the ones who carried everything and deserve to be heard. It started with a particular kind of kindness, the kind that makes you grateful at first and uneasy later. Mark and Karen began coming around more than usual. They brought groceries. They offered to help sort through paperwork. They said things like, "Dad, we should get your documents organized, just to be safe." At first I was glad. I thought maybe they'd finally realized I was alone out here, that they wanted to be present. But a man who spent 4 decades building things understands something about foundations. The cracks that bring a structure down aren't always visible from the outside. You have to get close. You have to press on the wall and listen. This house is not just wood and drywall and a roof. Dorothy and I started building it in 1974. I was 34 years old. We had almost nothing saved, and I poured the concrete footings myself over 3 weekends in October, while she handed me tools and kept the coffee coming. We finished it in stages over 3 years, room by room, doing what we could afford when we could afford it. Dorothy picked the kitchen tile. I built the cabinets. She planted the dogwood tree in the front yard that's still there, bigger now than either of us ever imagined it would get. When she died 6 years ago, I didn't change anything. I couldn't. Her reading glasses are still on the nightstand. Her sweater is still folded on the chair by the window. This house is the longest conversation Dorothy and I ever had, and I am not ready for it to end. The documents started first. A folder I kept in the filing cabinet, the one with the deed and the property tax records, wasn't where I'd left it. Then the bank statements started coming in and showing transactions I didn't recognize. Small amounts at first, then larger ones, for services I hadn't requested and accounts I couldn't identify. And then I noticed the signatures, my name on forms I had no memory of signing. on paperwork that had appeared on the kitchen table between one of Mark's visits and the next. When I brought it up, Mark sat across from me with that patient, careful expression I'd started to recognize and said, "Dad, I think you might just be forgetting. It happens. That's why we're here." He said it gently, almost kindly, and that gentleness, more than any blunt accusation could have, told me exactly what he thought of me. Then came the conversations about assisted living. They were never harsh. They were something worse. They were reasonable. "Dad, you'd have medical staff right there around the clock. Dad, you've worked hard your whole life. You deserve support now. Dad, we can't be here every day. You understand that." Karen always added her version of concern, that careful sighing worry that sounds like love but feels like impatience. I sat at the kitchen table I built from a kit the first winter Dorothy and I moved in, and I listened to them explain why I should leave my home. I didn't argue. I looked at the table, but my silence was not surrender. It was the only thing at that point that was still entirely mine. The night everything became clear, I wasn't looking for it. I'd gotten up around midnight. My knees were bothering me like they do, and I was walking to the kitchen for water. The light was on in the living room, and the door was halfway open. I heard Mark's voice, low and even. "The realtor said if we get the competency filing done before the end of the month, we can have the listing up by January." Karen answered something I couldn't fully make out. Then Mark again. "With the doctor's notes and the bank stuff, there's nothing he can do to stop it. It's all in place." I stood in the hallway and didn't move. My heart was beating slowly, heavily, the way it does when you're setting something in concrete and you know you have to get it right the first time because you won't get a second chance. I didn't cry. I didn't make a sound. I stood on the floor I had installed myself 30 years ago and understood, clearly, completely, without any room for doubt, that this was not a misunderstanding. This was a plan, with timelines, with a realtor, with legal filings, against me. I went back to bed and lay there without sleeping. I looked at the ceiling, the one small crack near the light fixture I'd been meaning to patch since spring, and I thought, slowly, carefully, the way you think when you're planning a job that has to be done right the first time and you only have one shot at it. I didn't think about how to confront them. I thought about what I had, what I was missing, who could help me, how much time I had before they moved again. The next morning I went into the garage. I hadn't spent real time out there in months, but it was all still exactly as I'd left it. Tools hanging on the pegboard, each one in its place. The hand plane, the levels, the old socket set in the metal box with the red lid. The bench I built from scrap lumber when I was 42, which has outlasted 3 power tools and shows no sign of giving up. I sat on the stool and looked at those tools for a long time. Every one of them was made for something specific. None of them worked in a hurry. None of them failed if you used them the right way, at the right time, with the right amount of patience. And then something settled in me. Not a plan yet, just a direction. I had spent my whole life building things that were meant to last. I knew how to do this. I just had to approach it the same way. I started writing things down. I found an old legal pad in the kitchen drawer, the yellow kind with the red margin line, and I started recording everything I could remember. Dates, Conversations, as close to word for word as I could get. Names of people who had called about the property. Bank charges I didn't recognize, with amounts and dates. Documents that had disappeared or appeared. I wrote it all in the small, careful print I'd used for job estimates my whole working life. No emotion on the page, no complaints. Just the facts, in order. The way you'd lay out a work plan before a job. Every material listed, every step sequenced, nothing assumed. That legal pad became my foundation. I needed someone outside the family. That was clear from the start. And that was the hardest part. Not because I didn't know who to call, but because my entire life I had been the man who handled his own problems, who didn't ask for help, who carried what needed carrying, and didn't let anyone see the weight. But I remembered something I'd said to a young guy on a job site once, when he was trying to muscle a beam into place that needed two people. Pride that gets you hurt isn't pride. It's just stubbornness with a better name. I called Robert Ellison, an old friend who had worked as a real estate attorney in Columbus for 30 years before retiring. I didn't explain much on the phone. I said, "Bob, I need your counsel on something serious." He came over the next afternoon. We sat at the kitchen table, the same way we'd sat at a dozen tables over the years. I told him everything, from the beginning. Bob listened the way a good attorney listens, completely still, no interruptions, no expressions that told me what he was thinking until I was done. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at me and said, "Walter, what you're describing has a name. It's called financial elder abuse, and in Ohio, it's a felony under the Adult Protective Services Act." He paused. Then he added, "And you are not losing your mind. You are being defrauded." Those two sentences changed everything I understood about the position I was in. I wasn't a confused old man who needed managing. I was a man whose rights had been violated, and those rights could be defended. Bob connected me with an elder law attorney in Columbus who specialized in exactly this kind of case. A woman in her 50s with a quiet, precise way of speaking that told you immediately she knew what she was doing. She reviewed the documents I'd brought, asked me questions that showed she was taking every detail seriously, and ordered an independent neuropsychological evaluation to establish a formal record of my cognitive status. She also started reviewing the bank records and the paperwork I'd cataloged in my legal pad, looking for specific irregularities. For the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten how to recognize. Clarity. Not victory yet, just clarity. What would you have done in my position? When you realize that the people you raised and provided for have been building a legal case to have you declared incompetent, not for your well-being, but so they can sell your home while you're still in it. Would you have stayed quiet? Would you have signed whatever they put in front of you? Or would you have decided, as I did, that dignity doesn't come with an expiration date? Tell me in the comments. Your answer might be the thing that gives someone else reading this the courage to do what they need to do. At home, in the meantime, I kept behaving exactly as I always had. That was harder than anything else about this process. Sitting across from Mark and Karen at dinner, listening to their concern, watching Karen clear my plate with that careful attentiveness that was supposed to feel like love, and saying nothing. One afternoon, Mark sat down next to me and said, "Dad, everything we're doing, it's because we care about you. I need you to know that." I looked at him directly, steadily, and said, "I know." Just that. No accusation, no tremor in my voice. Inside, I was noting the date, the words, the tone of his voice. He believed I'd accepted it. I let him believe that. In construction, when you're waiting for the concrete to set, the silence is part of the work. The forensic document examiner retained by my attorney compared the signatures on the contested forms against my original signatures from property records and notarized documents. Signatures I had made over the course of 30-plus years on legal instruments. The finding was unambiguous. 2 signatures on a document that had initiated a legal proceeding regarding the property were not mine. Someone, using my name, had signed a legal instrument without my knowledge or consent. That was forgery, a felony. This was no longer a family disagreement that could be resolved over a conversation at the kitchen table. This was a crime. The independent neuropsychological evaluation established what I had always known. My cognitive functioning was within normal range for my age. I forget where I've put things sometimes, but show me a person over 80 who doesn't. My recall of conversations, dates, sequences of events, contextual detail, all documented and normal. The competency filing they had been planning would have been contested and likely defeated on those grounds alone. Without that foundation, their strategy collapsed. And with the forged signatures, my documented records, and the witnesses my attorney had identified, the situation had reversed entirely. I was no longer the one being cornered. I called Mark on a Tuesday morning and said, in the same voice I always used, "Come over today. I need to talk to you." A brief silence. "Is everything okay, Dad?" "Come over," I said, and hung up. They arrived together, which was no surprise. I sat at the head of the table, my place, the one that has always been mine, and I opened the folders in front of them. The forensic examination report, the neuropsychological evaluation, the attorney's legal analysis letter, copies of the original property documents alongside the contested ones. Mark read the first page and went pale in that particular way that can't be rehearsed. Karen started talking quickly, the words coming out in that urgent rhythm of someone who knows the ground is moving under them. I raised my hand and said, "No, listen. I told them I was not going to take this to court, not because I couldn't, but because that wasn't what I wanted from this. I told them I wasn't acting out of bitterness because I had spent my life building things, not tearing them down. And I didn't intend to start now, but I told them also, with complete calm, that I had everything necessary for a criminal complaint on forgery and financial elder abuse, and that I would file it without hesitation if it came to that. And I told them what I should have said a long time before any of this started. This house is not an inheritance you're waiting on. This house is my life and Dorothy's life. And what happens to it is my decision to make, not yours, not a realtor's, not a judge who's never met me. Mine. As long as I am alive, it is mine. Mark said nothing for a long time. Karen was crying. I was not. There was no reason to be. For the first time and longer than I could remember, I was standing on ground I had built myself. 2 years have passed since that afternoon. Mark and I talk occasionally, the necessary things, Short and careful, nothing more. Karen doesn't come around. I understand there is a fracture that doesn't repair on its own, and may not repair at all in the way you'd hope it would. That hurts. A father who loved his children, and who now sits alone at the table he built from a kit in 1974, carries a particular kind of quiet grief that doesn't disappear. But there is something I no longer carry: the pretense. I no longer carry the pretense that everything was fine when it wasn't. Every morning I wake up, make coffee, walk out to the garage, and smell the sawdust and the oil. And that is mine. No one took it from me. My granddaughter Emma, my youngest son's daughter, who had nothing to do with any of this, calls me sometimes. She's 19, and she has a directness that reminds me of Dorothy. One evening she asked me, "Grandpa, do you regret anything about what you did?" I thought about it honestly. Then I told her, "I regret not seeing it sooner. I regret mistaking silence for peace. But defending myself, no. I don't regret that, and I never will." Emma said quietly, "I would have done the same thing." That sentence from a 19-year-old girl is worth more than any legal outcome. So let me leave you with the question that no one asked me when it would have mattered most. Is dignity something that fades with age, with the stiff joints and the names that sometimes slip away? Or is it the one thing that can remain standing when everything else begins to give? Think about that. And if you know someone, a father, a mother, a grandparent, whose family has started treating them as an inconvenience rather than a person, share this story with them. Because silence always protects the one who causes harm. It never protects the one who suffers it.